Good evening. I'm meteorologist Danielle Moss with a weather update for you. Today has definitely been one of those days, once again, where we started off nice and dry, but now we're tracking some scattered showers and thunderstorms. Here is a look at what's been happening over the last hour or so. You can start to see some of these storms are really starting to weaken just a little bit. However, some of them definitely caused some pretty heavy downpours earlier this evening. And as we put a little bit of a pause on it, what's happening right now, these showers are really stretching right across metro Atlanta. In fact, as we take a closer look into the 285 perimeter this evening, we do have some heavy downpours that are moving through portions of Cobb County right along that 285 west corridor. There's a few isolated showers that are moving right in the middle of the downtown connector as well, even through DeKalb, portions of Fulton County, North Fulton. We even see some pretty heavy downpours that are happening in DeKalb County. In fact, we have heard a report of a tree down in DeKalb County, and because of that, we do have a crew headed to the scene to see if they can see what's happening and give us an update and tell us what they are seeing in DeKalb County. That was at La Vista Road. As of right now, we're just looking at heavy rain. Most importantly, there is a flash flood warning in place for Fulton and DeKalb County until 11 o'clock tonight. So it's very important to keep your mind on the skies this evening, because even though we're not talking about severe weather, we have gotten a lot, and I do mean a lot of rainfall from Thursday to Friday to today, and even before Thursday. So these isolated showers, they have been heavy in nature, and now we're starting to see this trend continue on. And as we prepare for your Sunday, unfortunately, we will be tracking more rain as we head into your Sunday evening. This is a live look at Echo Park Speedway. Even earlier this evening, they had to make adjustments for that rainfall because there was a storm in the area. So they had to delay the start of the race there, but now things are looking a little bit better. As we time out, what can we expect in the next few hours? This is a look at our futurecast, and I'm just going to drag it through so we can walk it through together. At 10:30 p.m., we'll start to see some of this rainfall really dissipate, and then we will dry out. I'm not expecting any of the showers that you're seeing right now to be on the severe side. However, the ongoing rain just kind of happening over the same places over and over and over again. That's why we see those flash flood warnings in effect. So just make sure that if you're traveling on the major interstates around metro Atlanta, because it is for Fulton to DeKalb County, really around 285 and 75, we have heard multiple reports of ponding, flooding. They've had to close 75 right at MLK. Since then, it's been reopened, but that's how fast these showers move through, and that's how much rainfall we have seen. Yesterday alone, we almost collected an inch of rain just at the airport. So that puts it into perspective for you. What can you expect? Here's a look at your Sunday morning forecast. We're not expecting this rainfall to be continuing throughout the night. In fact, for tomorrow morning, it looks like we should be nice and warm once again. We'll have some clouds that will continue to roll through, and those of us that did get some rain, we might even see a little bit of a fog develop. We're not expecting a fog advisory or anything like that, but that's just a heads up as you make your Sunday morning plans. Tomorrow, throughout the day, what will it feel like? Because that's another part of this weather story, is while the temperatures are still very, very warm, that humidity picks up just a little bit if the rain starts too early. It also will cool us off if you do get some of that rain. So here's a look at your Sunday planner for tomorrow. Temperatures in the morning at 9 a.m. will be around 76 degrees, but it will feel like 80. And then it will climb throughout the day. Then once again, around 3 or 4 o'clock, we're expecting that same weather story to happen, where we see those isolated scattered showers and thunderstorms popping up. So it'll be 87, feeling like 92, and you can see how our temperatures start to fall as we head into the late evening, early nighttime hours. Once again, we are expecting these showers and thunderstorms to be continuing over the next few. I'm going to go back to radar and kind of walk you through exactly what we're looking at once again, just in case you're just now joining us. This is another look at our satellite and radar. Over the last hour, we did see some showers and thunderstorms. North Georgia looking pretty much clear, which is great news. There was a shower that was near Echo Park, and that was right along 75. That has since cleared, but right now our main focus will be the flash flood warning that is in effect right now for Fulton and DeKalb. And you can see this really heavy downpour that is in portions of Cobb County. I will say that the Braves still going on right now at Truist Park. Thankfully, they did not have to delay the game or take a rain delay at all. Right now, things are operating a little bit normal. Rainy out there for sure, but at least things are okay. Here's a look at our tower camera this evening. It went down. We took a power hit here at the station a little bit earlier this evening, so that one just went down for us. But here's like what it feels like outside, and I think this is telling of the weather story and what happened. And you can see exactly who has some rainfall right now currently and who is still very dry. Check out Athens. Right now it feels like 84 degrees there. Feeling like 81 in Covington and 82 in Canton. Meanwhile, Peachtree City feeling like 72 degrees. Blairsville feeling like 69. That's the difference. When you get a little bit of rainfall, you definitely feel that cooler air come in, and it's definitely a good relief from all of that heat that we have been experiencing. Once again, let's time out the next few hours. What can we expect? This is a look at our forecast track. Overnight tonight by 11 p.m., we're going to be dry, which is great news. And as we head into your Sunday morning is looking mostly dry, which is even better news. But once again, 2-3 o'clock, just make sure you have your rain gear handy because we're going to see some more scattered to isolated showers and thunderstorms happening. Severe weather not in the conversation, but just like today, because we've gotten so much rain, we could be seeing some more flooding. We could be seeing some trees down. Right now, we do have one report of a tree down in DeKalb County, but that's the only thing that we have on our radar right now. And then as you head into your Monday morning, you're going to rinse and repeat and do it all over again. So just be prepared over the next few days. Your highs for tomorrow near our average of 89 degrees. Will be around 90 here in Metro Atlanta. Some places being a little bit warmer. Once again, it all depends on how much rainfall you will be seeing. We do expect the summer storms to be continuing really from 2 to 10 p.m. almost every day this week. It won't start to dry out until we get closer and closer to the 4th of July. So let's time out your Monday. What can we expect for Monday? There you go. Afternoon and evening showers and thunderstorms. Nothing that's too concerning, but we've gotten a lot of rain. So if you get a lot of rain over and over again, that flooding chance is unfortunately going to continue to increase even as you head into your Tuesday. This is another way that we can show you that severe weather really not in the conversation right now. Monday, that severe weather threat is going to be north of us, and Sunday we're not even worried about severe weather, but that rain chance is going to be continuing throughout the next 5 days. And by Tuesday, we do have a 60% chance for some showers and maybe a few thunderstorms. As we time out our extended futurecast, what can we expect? This is Tuesday, more rainfall coming in. Right now, like I said, not looking at any severe weather chances right now. Obviously, things could be changing, but as of right now, we're not seeing any severe weather chances. But then as we head into your Thursday, this is July 3rd, it looks like we could be mostly dry. We have a good chance maybe seeing a 10 to 20% chance of light rain, but that should not be impacting your Thursday at all. Even for your Friday, if we do see any rain, it does look like we could maybe see an isolated shower around 7 p.m., but I don't really see it impacting any of those fireworks shows if you are going to be out celebrating Independence Day on Friday. And Saturday, once again, maybe a 20% chance of rain, but it looks like from Thursday through Saturday, things are looking a little bit more dry. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, unfortunately, we're going to be in this pattern of just wet skies in the afternoon and evenings. Here's a look at your 7-day forecast. It shows that exact story. Tuesday and Wednesday, because those rain chances are a little bit elevated, the temperatures drop. Tuesday, highs could be near 85 degrees with a 60% chance of showers and thunderstorms, and that will be continuing into your Wednesday. Now, by the time you get into your Thursday and Friday and your Saturday, because that rain chance is down, look at those. We're getting back very close to that mid 90 degree range, and you can bet that at 93 degrees on Saturday, when you factor in the heat index and you factor in the humidity and the dew point, it's going to feel more like 95 degrees out there. So you want to make sure that you're hydrating throughout this week as well, because I know a lot of people, they try to cut their grass in the morning, they try to do anything that they can outdoors so that they can get it out of the way. And there's no problem with that, but you need to make sure that you are still exercising caution when it comes to the heat in the morning and the early afternoon, because it can still be very, very hot during those hours. And then as we look forward to the afternoon, evening time, you want to make sure that you are weather aware for flooding, maybe even some trees that could come down, even some lightning. Myself, I saw lightning hit a transformer yesterday while I was driving, and that's just a normal severe thunderstorm. So you just want to make sure that you are weather aware, that's driving or even just hanging out in the backyard. And a lot of people have some time off and will be traveling here in the next few days. And that brings up another point. As far as travel is concerned, you definitely want to make sure that you are checking in with all of those airlines, because we're seeing some major delays coming out of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport here in Atlanta because of all these showers and thunderstorms. In fact, let's see if I can pull up a camera. We'll pull up some more radar, and then I'm going to pull up a camera so we can see what's happening at the airport right now. This is another look at that shower that's just slowly moving along 285 West and portions of Fulton and a very small portion of Cobb County as well. As of right now, though, we're not seeing any, severe thunderstorm warnings or anything like that. I think this is also very interesting is our 24-hour temperature change. In fact, we're 2 degrees warmer here in Metro Atlanta, but check out Peachtree City. They got a lot of rainfall. They are 6 degrees cooler. Meanwhile, Canton is 12 degrees warmer. Once again, Canton didn't really get a lot of rainfall today, so that's why they are experiencing a little bit of a break as far as that rainfall is concerned. Let's see if I can pull up one of our cameras here so that we can get a look into the airport and see what is happening. That is at Echo Park, where things are moving smoothly now, and they're not seeing any rain delays there, which is great news. There we go. There's the airport there. As of right now, not seeing any delays there. In fact, it's not even raining there at the airport, which is good news. In fact, I can see a few planes that are taxiing, which is great. And then if we pull up our Georgia Tech camera and see what's happening here in Midtown, we had some pretty heavy downpours here earlier as well. And in fact, we had two power surges here at the station. So you can just, see that even we are being impacted by these afternoon showers and thunderstorms. Even if we take a look into Rome right now, we're going to start to see some more fireworks and things happening as we get closer and closer to the 4th of July. But the sun is still setting. It's a little bit gloomy out there in some places, but overall, this is a pretty decent evening. The storms are not as strong as what we saw yesterday rolling through Metro Atlanta, North Georgia as well. We saw several severe thunderstorm warnings, and today we're not seeing those severe thunderstorm warnings. However, because of that rainfall over the last few days, we do have that flash flood warning in place. And just to be quite honest, I can probably expect the National Weather Service to expire that flash flood warning a little bit early. It is in effect until 11 p.m. It's for Fulton and DeKalb, but as you take a look across that 285 perimeter into Metro Atlanta, the only shower that's happening right now is the one that is happening right here along that I-20 corridor as well. Some pretty heavy pockets of rain moving through Fulton County, but we're not seeing anything that is concerning right now. Just make sure that you're staying up to date with that radar. Make sure you're staying up to date with all of the alerts that we are sending you from our app, and make sure you have multiple ways to get communications, because the ground is so saturated, the winds are too high, you could be seeing some trees come down, and that could cause you to lose some power as well. So just want to make sure that you are up to date on the latest forecast. But for now, I'm meteorologist Danielle Moss, and I will be on tonight at 11 p.m. on 11 Alive to bring you the latest weather for not only tonight, but throughout the next 7 days as well.